Hi BookTube, and welcome to a new video which is going to be focused almost entirely on Lucy Ellmann's Ducks Newburyport, which I have just finished today. But this is a recent reads video. So a brief update. So in my last Friday reads video I asked for advice whether I could smuggle this into a wedding so that I could read it on the journey down there. And everybody who commented said, yeah, absolutely. So the first thing to say is I read it and it's a 3-star, rather uninspiring collection of poetry. Joe Shapcott's Of Mutability. I'm not going to talk about it in any detail. But the good news was, what I didn't realise was when I put my suit on to go to this wedding, that the flap of the jacket pocket perfectly covered over, folded over and covered this book entirely. So there was no clue that I had a book in my suit pocket. But anyway, on to what I really want to talk about, which is Ducks Newburyport. So this is my now 6th completed Mammoth read, and this definitely qualifies as a Mammoth at 987 pages of text plus another 20 odd pages of sort of bits and bobs afterwards. So we are in August month 8. I'd always said that I wouldn't read a Mammoth in July when my own book was out. So I had planned to read 7 by the end of August. This is the 6th, so I'm halfway through the next one, although I want to pick up some shorter books to read before I get back to that. So I'm on course with my March of the Mammoths. Now, first of all, this is 5 stars. And the reason it's 5 stars is because, like David Peace's The Damned United, this takes you inside the mind of a human being like no other book. That a problem I have with so many books is the way characters are constructed by authors, either using sort of psychological theories, or they do it through sort of words which are slightly sort of throwaway and disposable, such as the character did this and then sort of reacted to it in the exact opposite way. That there's lots of sort of either ors that are sort of dispensed out. I mean, I'm not explaining that very well. This, and you would hope at 998 pages, is so thorough that you are absolutely left with a 3-dimensional plus view of a character. And as I say, that reminded me of the character of Brian Clough in David Peace's The Damned United. And in some ways they sort of use slightly similar techniques in that the rhythm is very important to sort of convey the speed of thought, the speed of association of ideas and words in both that book and in this book, because there's no full stops in here. But you are given breathing points by the much lampooned repeated use of the fact that, the fact that, the fact that. But it actually works very well. It's very carefully thought out by Ellmann as to, you know, giving the reader permission just to take a short mental breath. And one of the other techniques is, because of the nature of language and syntax, it's not always clear, because she's leaping around from one thing to another, it's not always clear which one of the previous things she's calling back to, and she has to explain herself. I mean X, not Y, you know, with reference to X, not Y. I will read a section of this just to give you an idea of how the language works, but I want to talk more about it. So it is character created by voice. There's very little plot in here. It does pick up a bit of a plot towards the end, which I won't go into for spoiler reasons. But you are absolutely transported inside the mind of a human being through the voice of her thoughts as written by Ellmann, and that is the supreme achievement of this book. It's an unremarkable character in many ways. She's a middle-aged Ohio mum who has given up her job in teaching and is trying to get a sort of home industry of baking, which she supplies to local restaurants and sort of health food shops. She's trying to get that off the ground. So in that respect, she's unremarkable. She's everyday. She's the mother of 4 children. So we get a lot of her thoughts about motherhood and her anxieties, both about her own business and baking, but also about school shootings, the right to carry, the ecological damage that's been done. You know, she lives in Ohio, so it's near sort of Flint, Michigan, with air water problems. Her husband is a structural engineer and lectures on sort of collapsed bridges. So again, sort of wear and tear or just bad design of sort of mankind causing these disasters. So she's chock full of anxiety. Any parent would be anxious about their children. That's sort of almost biologically programmed. But she's also still in mourning. She's, you know, there's a great amount of grief for the death of her own mother, who died when she was relatively young. But as I say, that in a way is very unpromising, unfertile ground to write 998 pages, but absolutely not. It is a beautiful woven tapestry of the multifarious thoughts of a human being, because this book shows you how human beings think, not like constructed characters of most authors, but the actual way that our brain is rapid fire. It associates words, it associates ideas, and all of that is reproduced on the page. And that is what drives you through this book. Not plot, not even necessarily, you know, the concerns that she shares, because they're sort of quite circular. They're quite repeated throughout the book. Because, as I say, we get a lot of repeated thoughts, repeated word associations, but you also get them taking off in new directions. So she was talking about potlatch early on, and I thought there's got to be an association to Pol Pot, you know, the tyrannical leader of the Khmer Rouge government in Cambodia. And there wasn't at that point, but Pol Pot, that association of Pol Pot and potluck or potlatch, whatever, did appear later in the book. So it's both repetitive, but also actually subtly moves on, subtly takes you onto slightly new territory and stuff. I would say there is a subplot about a mountain lion, which I think American viewers, could correct me if I'm wrong, is what we know as cougars. We don't really have a concept of a mountain lion. And you think, well, this is a bit odd. She's a mountain lion with 3 kittens in the wild. But actually it's beautiful. First of all, it's a beautiful study of motherhood, although, yes, it's anthropomorphic in that it's sort of human emotions applied to an animal. But actually, as the novel wears on, it's absolutely woven into the novel. It's there for a reason and purpose, and works surprisingly effectively, I think. So, all in all, as I say, for me, this represents human beings and how we think, and how our brains work, much, more than 98% of other novels, which is why I give it 5 stars, which is why I equate it to David Peace's The Damned United, which is a very different voice and a very different character, but in a way is doing the same thing of getting you right inside a mind in a very believable way. What are our daily anxieties? What crazy associations do we make? Why do snatches of songs suddenly appear in our head? Well, because it's playing off a word that is in her current thoughts and anxieties. And the other reason I like this so much is because it gives an insight into the hyper-real, by which I mean the sort of penetration of media inside our thinking, so that we can no longer distinguish what's our own thoughts and what has come from these outside sources of film, of song, of books, of TV news, because it infects and colours our own thoughts, particularly something like the news. But there's an awful lot in here about films, about musicals, about Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie, and all that sort of stuff, because there are associations sort of firing off back to these sources, but also from these sources. And again, to me, that is an absolutely vital element of literature, because literature itself is hyper-real. You read a book and it sort of sinks into you and infects your own thoughts. But it never, what you just read never happened. It's fiction. And yet, as I say, it can colour your thoughts. You can carry a book around with you mentally, quoting from it, or just sort of influenced by its ideas, or emotionally moved, all these sorts of things. But from a piece of work about something that isn't true. And that's, you know, the hyperreal is really, again, effectively sort of demonstrated here. As I say, the influence of films and music and books and TV news on her everyday thought. So, just by way of closing, I'll read a section. I will say that 998 pages, the author is throwing down a challenge, and this book is not for everyone, not only because of its length, but because of what I've described. If you want a plot, if you're not particularly one for sort of repetitive, rhythmic voice, all those reasons are why you might not want to read this book, and that's fine. And it is a challenge, you know, to get through nearly 1,000 pages without a plot to drive you through. But you know, the writing never bored me. I never tired of what I was being exposed to about this character's thought processes and mental associations and linguistic associations and imagistic associations that have the effect of the hyperreal. I mean, I can't get enough of that, simply, as I say, because not enough books, you know, deal with character like that. Because it's awful that most mothers pass away never knowing what will happen to their kids. The fact that that's so sad, because you're supposed to protect them, not desert them. And no matter how old your kids will get, you'll still want to know how they are. You'll always want to know. And a song lyric, it won't be long until we're there with snow, snow, snow. The fact that maybe I should just like zone out and be zen or something, meditate, levitate, contemplate nothingness, reach nirvana, communal crying. The fact that Ethan got me to promise him long ago that if I was ever really desperate, like suicidal or something, that I would tell him, which still really comforts me. The fact that I know he's there if I need him. The fact that I think he was kind of worried about me for a while when I was a teenager. The fact that everybody should have that promise from somebody. A guaranteed listener if you're ever really losing it. And then later on that page, I just realised that when this monologue in my head finally stops, I'll be dead, or at least totally unconscious like a vegetable or something. The fact that there are 7.5 billion people in the world, so there must be 7.5 billion of these internal monologues going on, apart from all the unconscious people. The fact that there's 7.5 billion people worrying about their kids or their moms or both, as well as taxes and windowsills and medical bills, shut in, shut out, dugout, bullpen. The fact that that's not counting the multiple personality people who must have several internal monologues going on at once. So, yeah, I just think this book is brilliant. 5 stars, will definitely be in my top 10. Just again on this sort of nature of the intimidating nature of the read. It's not difficult language. This was published in 2019, and I started it as my March of the Mammoth. Was it last year? No, I'm not sure when it came out in 2019, but anyway, I did it for my March of the Mammoth in 2019 and read 200 pages in March. Then I put it down. Not because I wasn't enjoying it, but because I wanted to be... I felt I was missing out on reading other books. And then when lockdown hit, which was about March, almost exactly a year later, I picked it up. No, this would be May probably, in lockdown, when it was warm weather. I read outside. I read 100 pages in a week, so I was up to page 300. And I thought, this is great. But again, I put it down for the same reason. I wanted to read other stuff. This time, because I was determined to A, finish it, B, it's part of my Mammoth programme, it took me, so the remaining 700 pages, it took me 12 days, of which 2 days I wasn't able to do any reading. So really 10 days for 700 pages. That's 70 pages a day. I wasn't reading anything else at the same time. So it is a challenge, but it's actually very doable as well. As I say, I think the reasons for not reading this, as if it doesn't sound like your type of thing, I don't think a reason for not reading this is its length. I don't think that should be a barrier. But as I say, if you're not interested in an unpromising, well, first of all, plotless, unpromising character and that she's an ordinary mum, but actually I think the anxieties of motherhood and society outside of the window of your kitchen that you're baking in are actually, I think, make for very good subject matter. or the fact, you know, how it's done stylistically, there's no full stops, it's a sort of stream of consciousness, there's lots of association, word association and stuff. I think those are legitimate reasons for you thinking this isn't your type of book. As I say, I don't think the length